All right, y'all. So we've just finished English and French Romanticism, and we're now into the third component called German Romanticism. And I'm hoping as you're paying attention, you're thinking about not just what are the traits of Romanticism in general, but also which traits make these national movements unique. For German Romanticism, my big focus on uniqueness will be the folk tales. The creation of the folk tales will be all about nationalism. And why would German Romanticism be so focused on nationalism? You're right. Of course, it's all about this concept of nationalism and national identity. So let's go and jump in. All right, the Brothers Grimm. The Brothers Grimm, they worked throughout the early 19th century to collect the German folklore. So they go from each of the different regions to gain up these folklore, fairy tales, stories, and they're going to combine them into this thing called the Grimm's fairy tales. And these fairy tales are going to become the foundation, if you will, of this German nationalism. It's the first real attempt that we may see here in which we're using print culture to create a singular German identity. Very significant. Again, we're seeing this nationalizing movement, and again, one of the other elements we can reflect this Gothic themes, medieval. Uh, my big focus, though, is the Grimm brothers. The folklore really is all about nationalism. Now, let's look at the art now. I love Caspar David Friedrich. He is so cool. When I was in Berlin this past summer, I was able to view some of his works. Absolutely phenomenal. This is probably his most famous AP Euro piece, and it's Man and Women Contemplating the Moon. You have a Gothic feeling. You have this looking out from this Gothic forest and pondering the moon, almost as if thinking about the future. Really good piece. He did several other pieces that were almost identical to this piece, but that's where we're going to look at that one. Very cool stuff. But my favorite piece by him is really The Wander Above a Sea of Fog, 1818. This really connects me to German, the concept of German uh, naturalism, pantheism. You see this piece right here. The reason I find it to be so fascinating is the wanderer is faceless, right? We're seeing behind him. He's less important. And it's about this broad breadth of nature. And he's just pondering. And the cool thing is when I was in Berlin this past summer, we actually went to where he painted this. I was on a trail that went there, and it's absolutely gorgeous. They're connecting to this concept of nature, very similarly to the English Romantics. And we see this piece, really cool. Now, this is the first time we've talked about music, maybe in a long time, if not the first time at all. We're going to look at this idea of nationalism and how music becomes part of these national movements. Before this time period, I think of music and as highbrow. It's about high culture. It's about the nobility. Well, by the time we get to the Romantic era, this type of music, which you might consider classical, is now for the masses. Beethoven is one who really introduced this idea of nationalism, this idea of hope and romantic desires for the future. And I think it's probably his most famous is the Third Symphony or Eroica, which is heroic. And this is the piece I talked about earlier with Napoleon. He actually originally did this in honor of Napoleon until he declared himself emperor and he tried to destroy the whole work. Now, this becomes a foundation of German nationalism, that concept in the fighting against the face of fraternity of Napoleon, such a powerful element. And it seems that this Ninth Symphony, and I'm not much of a music historian here at all, but it seems like the Ninth Symphony becomes even more of a nationalized moment, that during the 1960s, at the height of the Cold War, this will be their German national anthem that was to combine the two German teams. Kind of an interesting element, but Beethoven definitely utilizes his music, encapsulates his romantic emotions to bring about a sense of nationalism. And this would be Franz Liszt. Out of this movement, he introduces this concept of symphonic poem. Liszt was Hungarian, though he lived in the German Empire, of course, or the Austrian Empire, excuse me. So primarily he spoke most likely German, but also spoke Hungarian as well. He introduced this idea of symphonic poems. And these symphonic poems are these singular movements that are meant to reflect a subject or scene. And the whole point is to evoke the appropriate emotions. So he is utilizing music to play on the emotions of the audience to achieve a goal. When we think maybe this is almost like demagoguery, if you will, through music. His symphonic poems are going to be tied to both German and Hungarian national movements, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But again, Liszt, I didn't realize this. My next slide, I had no idea about this, but it seems that Liszt was one of the first superstars of the age, and they actually called this at the time Listomania, which is such a weird kind of thing. But during the 1840s, it appeared that he had a whole bunch of fangirls that absolutely kind of went crazy. It first occurred in Berlin in 1841, but it's going to continue throughout the decade through his peak. There is conversation that maybe it's because of his handsome looks, combined with the music. If you want to, you can actually just read the Wikipedia article on this. It's so crazy. But here you see a political cartoon that's kind of making fun of the fangirls. Over here, you see almost like crowd surfing, and the husband here maybe is trying to keep his wife in control, maybe. But again, totally interesting elements. But with that said, that's going to be the foundation, the idea of German Romanticism. A little bit of the folk tales, the German language, and we're going to introduce this nationalistic movement. And the whole hope was to create a German identity, a national consciousness that eventually would lead us to a united Germany. This is going to, the fruit of this movement will be the Frankfurt Parliament in the 1848-49, and hopefully you've already finished that read and you realize all of that basically comes to an end, and we'll see that in our next lecture. But with that said, I'm going to pause here.